a new show has just come up on the street called the Saurabh and Sagar Show. It is a hit with the audience and has taken the industry by storm. Google will begin flagging AI-generated images in search later this year. Meta just released Llama 3.2 and the company says it's going to revolutionize GenAI.
AI coding startup Poolside raises $500 million from eBay, Nvidia, and others. Pinterest rolls out GenAI tools for product imagery to advertisers. Microsoft starts paying publishers for content surfaced by Copilot.
AI leading coach startup Elo now lets kids create their own stories. Augmented Intelligence claims its AI can make their chatbots more useful.
OpenAI might raise the price of ChatGPT to $44 by 2029. Audible experiments with new AI features for tailored audiobook recommendations.
And that's from news for today. Please tune in to our next section, which is Conversations on the Street. Hello everyone, welcome to Saurabh and Sagar Show, and today we are going to talk about generative AI, data science, machine learning. And Saurabh, what do you think with Gen AI? Obviously you'll have some myths.
All right, so starting with myth number one, GenAI thinks like human. GenAI thinks like human. It doesn't actually, still an advanced pattern recognition system. It generates content based on statistical relationship within data it has been trained on. It doesn't understand the world the way we do. We have understanding beyond what we have learned, understanding about relationships, about different context, about different culture. GenAI is a trained system. It's a trained machine. It's still not close to being human.
I agree. Next one.
Yeah, myth number two, GenAI will replace humans.
Oh, I hope not. I don't want to get out of my job.
Yeah, and especially when you talk about life, like emotional intelligence and decision making. Some of the areas where I don't think AI or GenAI will replace humans. Humans are to stay. We are there to do our laundries. Drop kids to school, buy groceries. So I don't think GenAI will replace humans. Humans with GenAI will definitely replace humans without GenAI.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm with you there. So Saurabh, both you and me come from data engineering field, and it would be better to get an expert or a subject matter expert in GenAI on the show to talk about GenAI and give us probably a crash course on GenAI. So let's get our next guest who has been a data scientist or is a data scientist, has been working on a Gen AI, machine learning AI space for a long time, has worked with me on multiple projects, is a good friend of mine. Today, our guest is Harish Suresh. Harish has been in the industry for over 19 years now. Is that correct, Harish? And you have been in different roles in your career. You started as a consultant, you have been a software engineer, you have been a data scientist. You now are a principal data consultant at Mantle Group. So a lot of experience in this industry. And I thank you for taking time to speak to us and our audience on GenAI.
Yeah, thank you both for inviting me.
Welcome to the show.
Where should I start if I'm just out of the college or want to be a data scientist? What's the starting point?
Well, I might start with how I started my data science career. So in 2015, data science was a new buzzword and everyone wanted to get into the industry. Back then, information was a lot more limited. So I had to go to university. I had to learn the math and the calculus behind a lot of these ML algorithms and understand ways to implement them using some of the basic libraries in Python and R. But the industry has come a long way since then. Today, you have so many managed services on the cloud where you just have to bring your own data. Tune just a subset of the parameters required, and you can have a high performance model. So I think the barrier to entry for someone entering the field is a lot lower now. And there's plenty of free material available online. You don't need to have a degree anymore to get into the industry. You could just get plenty of material on YouTube. I think deeplearning.ai is a great resource for people that want to understand the underlying resources. There's plenty of free information if anyone wants to get started out there.
There's so much words like GenAI, AI, there's ML. Could you explain the entire ecosystem around AI, machine learning, GenAI? Where does it relate to each other and how does it fit in all together?
Sure. I think a lot of those terms are used interchangeably, but the way I've seen it used more commonly is machine learning is when someone just wants to use some of the basic algorithms like regression, classification, and clustering. They're working with tabular or structured data and tables. And these are tasks that you typically expect a computer to be able to handle. So we call those things the traditional ML algorithms. When they start to interact with the real world, that's when it goes into the realm of AI. So that's when the models can see images or listen to audio and extract text, or even take that text and respond back with speech. So once that human interaction comes in, I see people terming that as artificial intelligence. And Gen AI is definitely the word that's become a lot more popular with the rise of LLMs. By definition, a generative AI model is something that can create new content that it hasn't seen before. So you might provide a prompt saying, tell me a story about a certain topic. And the model can reference its internal knowledge and come up with something new that it probably hasn't seen in its training data. So that's where Gen AI comes in.
And just on that, so if I expand that a little bit more, then you have got foundational models. You have got something called as large language models. I don't know whether that's the same thing as foundational models. Then you have got conversational models. So what are these different model types and where should I start?
Yeah, I think it's definitely brought about a lot of new terminology that we hear about in blogs or videos. So I'll start with the foundation model. So a foundation model is effectively a general model that has been trained on a large corpus of text. So the reason we call them large is because even the smallest ones have 1 billion parameters that need to be trained. And the big ones are 400 billion plus. And people say things like ChatGPT are 1 trillion. So that's why we have the large in LLM. They are trained on corpuses of text. So think of, textbooks, websites. You just feed it information and the model is trying to understand the relationship between different words so that when someone asks for a new prediction, it looks at its historical training to produce new content. So that's what the base foundation model is. And in many situations, your training data sets are just generic websites. It might just be Wikipedia, or more common websites on the internet, but it may lack your domain specific information. So take the cloud providers, internal data sets that may not be part of the initial training. So we have the process of fine tuning where you feed it new information. The model starts to learn, adapt to the new domain, and you can teach it something new. To make it a conversational agent, we often use specific data sets like taking call center logs and teaching it how to respond in a specific tone or a specific manner. So it gets that very eloquent way of communicating with people. And that's when it becomes a conversational agent.
One question on prompt engineering. Suppose I'm someone who doesn't know prompt engineering. Can I ask the LLM, ChatGPT, start with one question, like very simple, and then let the LLM ask, can you ask clarifying question so that help me write better prompt, help me give you enough context before you give me the answer. So can I the intelligence to prompt and say, you ask me, rather than I trying to figure out the best prompt to write to give you the context. You help me what you need from me, and then it's via dialogue conversation. Is that possible?
It is possible, but I think the only challenge with that is the knowledge cutoffs on some of the LLMs would probably be in October of 2023. And some of the newer prompt engineering techniques have only come out after. So because the LLM itself did not have this information when it was trained, or, if you flip it the other way, we came up with these prompt engineering techniques because we couldn't get good answers from the LLMs. You may not necessarily get the most effective approach, but I've had many situations where I've wanted to do a task and I've given the entire prompt to the LLM as a meta prompt saying, hey, come up with a prompt to help me write code to do this. And sometimes it just cleans things up, removes bad grammar or redundant sentences. So I still think meta prompting can be used, but if you've got other techniques, you'd get a lot more value with that.
So one of the points that you made on the LLMs is the vast data that they are trained on, and that may or may not be accurate. So how do you make sure that the results you're getting from LLMs are correct and accurate?
So you're right. That's definitely been a challenge with a lot of the LLMs recently where it produces toxic or harmful or copyrighted content. Unfortunately, the challenge there is always having a good evaluation benchmark. So we've got the new field of responsible AI where we define certain data sets that have standard answers that typically trip up bad responses. So if you know that type of query is going to give you a bad response, you would just include it in the data set and then have an evaluation metric to see, is the LLM giving you the expected answer or is it giving you a bad answer? So we've got automated mechanisms to track such problems and correct it, or maybe even a human in loop process to fix it. It is something that you also see with image generation models, where you find a lot of image generation models produce copyrighted images with little watermarks at the bottom because when they were trained, they used images that contain watermarks. So ideally, move it upstream, try to avoid bringing that data into your training data set. If not, you just evaluate, retrain, and fine tune until that doesn't come into the loop.
I want to ask a question more towards what's behind the scene. Like if me as an organization wants to build my own LLM for the domain in which I'm working on, what's the role of your data platform? What's the role of your data, the quality of data you have in your organization? How does that play a role in the GenAI use case in building any LLM?
Harish, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think organizations should be creating large language models. They should be using large language models with their data. And that's where the quality of data comes in. Is that the correct framing? Or you think organizations should be creating their own large language models?
I think the number of situations where an organization needs to create an LLM from scratch is very, very small. In most cases, if you think about the initial hundreds or thousands of training epochs, it's just learning language, right? It's learning ABCs, words. So you don't want to spend time starting from scratch. These days, you've got access to a lot of open source models like the Llama family of models, where it has a good basic understanding of things. So when you want to train it to your domain specific tasks, most of the heavy lifting is done. So it already knows 80% of what it needs, and you're only training out on the remaining 20% of content that is bespoke to your organization or hidden from the original training data set. But again, fine tuning also can get expensive because you have to run the data through the model hundreds of times. And these are large, massive models with a lot of parameters. So it takes heavy compute with huge GPU instances. So there are a lot of challenges to doing fine tuning. And I think most organizations find that they can get their results with prompt engineering or RAG and some of these techniques. And in the situations where the more cost-effective solutions don't work, fine-tuning may be your only choice, but you do have more cost-effective ways to do fine-tuning these days. So the field is evolving where we can get more done with less training, so you're not getting massive compute bills at the end.
Can you explain me, coming from a data engineering space and not data science space? So when you get a foundational model, so you said the large language models is really a correlation between different words, right? Is that correct? So when I install a large language model inside my data center or get it from Hugging Face or somewhere, is it storing all those words on my disks? How does that work, or is it just metadata storing? What is the large, like, what are different components of large language model when I store it in my data center?
Yep. Interestingly, it is storing all of those words because the starting point to a large language model is something that's called a tokenizer. And what a tokenizer does is for every word in the English language, it has an associated number, a unique ID. So, when you say the cat and the dog, that's token number 25, 152, some set of numbers. So every time we feed text into a large language model, it's doing a lookup against the tokenizer to find out what IDs this corresponds to, because when it was trained, it looked at relationships between word number 25, word number 36. It doesn't know the words themselves. They were just placeholders, and the model understood relationships between certain words. And that's what you're getting when you download a large language model from Hugging Face. You get a tokenizer that can convert it into these numbers, and then you have a massive mathematical model that can take all the combinations between these numbers, perform matrix multiplication, thousands or millions of times. And the end result is what is the next word that comes in the sequence. So the cat and the dog were dash, and then it's just performing mathematics to predict probabilistically what is the next word in the sequence. Once it gets that, it feeds it back into the input and then does it over and over again. And that's what the LLM is doing on a server.
One word is very common in GenAI, like hallucination.
Mhm.
Yeah, could you expand that? What does that mean in GenAI space?
So hallucination is when the model predicts something with confidence, which is completely garbage. I think it's something we see in humans as well, interestingly, so it's not unique to just AI. The most common situation is when that information is unavailable. There was a famous scenario where someone asked an LLM, give me a URL to explain a topic to me about complex mathematics, and it did a great job. And then they said, show me where you got this from, and it gave a URL. That URL led to nowhere. It's just a dummy URL that it made up. It's just github.com, some random digits, because it has seen that pattern in the data. Another very famous problem that you see with ChatGPT is ChatGPT can't multiply. Or if you ask it things like, how many R's are there in the word strawberry? It always gets it. The older model used to get it wrong, but then the model will constantly tell you, you know what, this is the right answer. So it's because the model's just trying to predict the next token probabilistically. So it performs a calculation and it says, 95%, this is the next word or the next letter that needs to come in the sequence. And sometimes that's just the wrong answer. It's not really referencing the truth, which is where you have techniques like RAG and grounding, where you tell the model, when you respond, also show me the chunk from where you got this information. So it's referencing an actual file.
The other day I was trying to tell my daughter that there is a fancy tool called ChatGPT engine. I said, yeah, I use it in my school homework, and I got a shock, because I didn't know. And in my house, someone is using ChatGPT. I don't know. So she does it for all her assignment, but she said GenAI is not good. She said, if you ask number of I in word intermediate, it will not lie. So yeah, it is intelligent, but some of the scenarios like this, it can't do work. But I'm amazed to see the number of places, the number of lives it has changed today, not only for tech people in non-tech, people like kids at home in school. So yeah, that's crazy.
That's definitely a disruptive technology.
You touch based on another concept, and I want to go a bit deep into that, is RAG. What is RAG, and what does RAG stand for?
So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what that means is sometimes the LLM doesn't have the answer to a question in its own knowledge. So if I went and asked it, where is Harish going for the long weekend? It's not going to know. It's going to hallucinate and say something that's completely wrong. So what I can do to get an answer to that question is I can take information from my calendar or emails and put it into a vector database. So a vector database is a new kind of database that takes words or sentences and turns it into a vector. So a vector is effectively a mathematical representation of an object. So think of it as there's a unique 100 number 100 pairs of numbers that represent what a cat is, and there's another 100 pairs that represent what a dog is. So this is how LLMs understand different things. So you run it through an embedding model, you generate a vector, you put it in a vector database, and sometimes you have too much information. You don't know which are the most relevant chunks you might have 6 years of my calendar, so you don't want to send all 6 years into the prompt, overload ChatGPT. So what you do there with RAG is when you ask it a question, where is Harish going today? Look in my calendar. It's going to look at the most relevant chunk. So it's going to see, where topics where Harish is traveling over the weekend. It's going to do a search across the vector database, find maybe the top 3 to 4 relevant chunks, bring that into the prompt, and then send it to the prompt saying, where's Harish going this weekend? And then it'll get 3 to 4 blobs where I might have put in my travel plans or flight tickets or something else. And then the model reads the prompt, responds back with the full data set. So it lets models be a bit more dynamic. It gives it access to information that it didn't have before without doing heavy fine tuning.
What's your perspective on the ethical use of GenAI?
I think it's a human factor with how we use any technology, be it cloud or mobile, the internet. As long as we are responsible with how we use it and we have the right safeguards and compliance, I think AI will be a safe technology that can be used ethically. But I think it's on us to make sure that we develop the models the right way, prevent misuse, and have something in place to protect people from plagiarism and copyright. Because if everyone's going to take an LLM or try to replicate someone's voice or picture and generate AI avatars, eventually people are going to say, I'm not going to put any content out there. I mean, looking at the Saurabh Sagar Show, at some point, would you want an AI avatar speaking and doing this with AI guests? I don't know.
Sagar and myself would love a GenAI, a version of ourselves coming and taking interviews and talking on the show. We don't do any.
This is a fun part of for me in this show. I'm going to ask you some rapid questions, or rapid fire. Without thinking, you need to give me an answer. For example, I'll ask you, Sagar or Sagar the Great, and your answer will be?
I think Sagar the Great. You've definitely done
Correct.
so much. So that's a
Good one. So that's how we'll do. Okay, so let's start. Gen AI or machine learning?
GenAI.
Llama or Snowflake's Arctic? It's a tricky question. Give me a correct answer.
I think I'll have to lean to Llama for that one. The new model has been quite interesting. I'm waiting for Arctic 2 to come out. I'm sure that'll definitely give Llama some competition.
Okay. For you, Saurabh?
Well, I'm not into deep into GenAI, so I can say Arctic.
Good choice. Hugging Face or OpenAI?
I'll go with OpenAI.
Okay. Gen AI for chatbot or Gen AI for coding?
I like coding, so GenAI for chatbot.
So,
Yeah, GenAI for coding.
off-the-shelf models or custom build?
Off the shelf. Too much effort to do custom.
Technical skills or social skills?
Social, I think. Social, definitely some technical skills are easy to pick up. There's plenty of Udemy courses, but I think social skills are important too.
This one is also tricky. Sales or consulting?
Consulting any day.
Build a platform or buy a platform?
I like building, so build.
Okay. Thank you, Harish, for being on our show and giving honest answers. I'm sure a lot of our audiences who are watching this would find this helpful. I found it helpful. I got a lot of information about Gen AI from you, and really thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
It was great chatting with you.
That was me, Sagar Kulkarni, along with my co-host Saurabh Kumar, talking about Gen AI and in conversation with Harish Suresh. I hope you found this episode helpful. Please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, put your comments, like this video, and until next time, please be safe, take care, and goodbye.